Welcome. I am Bully, and tonight I have gathered a denim vest covered in DIY patches. Something disturbing yet familiar lurking in the shadows, and a whole lot of D10s, so I can summon for you a tutorial for the Storyteller System. The Storyteller System is the basic rule system for all of World of Darkness 5th edition games. At the time of this video, that includes Vampire the Masquerade, Hunter the Reckoning, and a Werewolf the Apocalypse. There will be other videos exploring the specific rules to those games, but essentially if you learn this system and these basic core mechanics, you mostly know how to play all of them. In the Storyteller System, the person running the game is called the Storyteller. This person is the one who is the arbitrator of the rules and also the narrator of the game. The players are called the players. They're the ones who are narrating their characters through a series of, narration and dice rolling. This system is a D10 system, meaning all you need to play are D10 dice. Each one of the games also has a special dice that you could buy and use instead of D10 if you want to do that. At its core, the Storyteller System follows a basic sort of mechanical loop where the player will describe what they want to achieve and how they're going to achieve it. And then if it requires a roll, the storyteller will ask for a dice roll and they'll determine the difficulty of this dice roll. Then the player will gather their dice, make the roll, and figure out how many successes they had on their roll. And then depending on if the number of successes either met or exceeded the difficulty of the roll, the storyteller will interpret the results, either narrating how they succeeded or failed or letting the player do so. Characters in this system have 9 attributes and 24 skills. When you create a character, you will put dots, they're also called ranks or levels or whatever. It all means the same thing. You'll put these into those traits. The more dots you have in a trait, the better you are at the trait. These traits are categorized into physical, social, and mental. Another thing about this system is there's no levels or classes or anything like that. When you get experience, you'll spend that experience to increase your dots in these different traits. There's other things to spend it on, but we'll get into that with the character creation videos. This system uses dice pools. A dice pool is used to determine the margin of an action's success or failure. The number of dice in a dice pool are determined by the number of dots you have in your traits. In most cases, a storyteller is going to ask you to assemble a dice pool using an attribute and a skill. So you'll grab a dice for each dot you have in this attribute and skill that make up your dice pool. You'll roll all of them and you'll try to get as many successes as possible. That's going to kind of determine how your character does things. It's possible that you're going to be asked to make a dice pool using a skill you don't have any dots in. In that case, you could still roll. You'll just roll using your attribute. All dice pools will have at least 1 dice being rolled. Some dice pools might use traits other than attributes and skills. Some might use 2 attributes. For example, rolling your composure plus resolve is a common way to resist different supernatural mental effects. Whatever makes up your dice pool, the storyteller is the one that's going to make that call and tell you which ones to use. All you really have to do is count your dots, grab your dice, roll them out. Now when you're assembling a dice pool, there's also unique dice that each game has. Vampire the Masquerade has hunger dice, Werewolf has rage dice, Hunter has desperation dice. In most cases, you'll assemble your dice pool, and then you'll replace a certain number of those dice with the unique dice to that game. We'll get into how that works more on those videos for those games. Generally, how this works in the system is the more of these unique dice you have in your dice pool, a lot of times those unique dice have special results, which means it's more likely you're going to get these special results while trying to do your action, for better or worse. Let's do an example of a dice roll so you can see it in action. So say in our scenario, your character has snuck into a warehouse to steal an item. You have that item, you're trying to leave without being noticed, but unfortunately a security guard does notice you. They stop you and they question you to see if you belong there. you tell them that of course you belong there. You're there to perform a personal errand for the boss, and you're going to try to convince them of that. In this instance, a storyteller can ask you to roll a manipulation plus subterfuge. Now in this example, you have 4 dots in manipulation, 3 dots in subterfuge. You're very good at this, which means when you're assembling your dice pool, you're assembling 7 dice, and you're going to roll those 7 dice to see if you can convince this guard that you belong there and to let you leave. Now, whether you're successful or not depends on the difficulty of the roll. The difficulty is determined by the storyteller. This is essentially the number of successes that are required to successfully do your action. Now, there's also modifiers to your dice pools. A modifier is something that adds or subtracts to the number of dice in your dice pool. A lot of these are determined by your storyteller based on the circumstances of the narrative, but there's a lot of mechanics that apply modifiers as well. Another way for the storyteller to modify a dice roll, instead of modifying the number of dice, they might just raise or lower the difficulty of the action. Some of the more common modifiers that you'll find in the mechanics are as follows. Skills can have specialties. If you're assembling a dice pool to do an action, and that action happens to fall into a specialty in that skill, you get to add 1 dice to your dice pool. There are minor actions, which we'll get into later, but essentially if you're trying to do an additional thing on top of a normal action, doing that will cause a 2 dice penalty to your main action. For example, if you want to reload a weapon and then fire that weapon in the same turn, you don't have to roll to reload, but because that's a minor action, firing a weapon that same turn, when you make your dice pool, you'll remove 2 of the dice before rolling. There's also teamwork. So if multiple characters are trying to accomplish the same thing and the storyteller allows, the character with the largest dice pool for that task makes the roll, and then they add a dice for each additional character helping with them, as long as that character has the relevant skill or it makes sense for them to do so. Some abilities and powers do have set difficulties. Difficulty can range from difficulty 1 for something that's just very routine. And the book gives an example up to difficulty 7, which is something that should be nearly impossible. Typically, a good storyteller shouldn't really require rolls for things that are very low difficulty unless there's a dramatically appropriate reason to do so. Here's an example from one of the books showing a chart of the various difficulties and some examples of actions that fall into those difficulty levels. This gives you an idea of maybe what you're going to be looking for when you're assembling your dice pools and how many successes you need. A storyteller can tell a player what the difficulty is as they assemble their dice pool so they know how much they're going for, or they could keep the difficulty number to themselves. So the player rolls their dice, counts their successes, and then they wait for the storyteller to reveal whether their action was successful or not. So now that we know how to assemble our dice pool and we know how many dice to roll, now we need to determine how do we know what's a success and what is not on the dice result. We're going to use D10s for all of our examples for this. Now each game has a specialty dice you can use, or something unique, where instead of numbers they'll have a symbol for success, usually a blank for failure, and then other symbols for other results. For our purposes, we're going to stick to a D10. So for each D10 you roll, every one that shows a 6 or higher is considered a success. Anything below that is a failure or really just doesn't count. All we're concerned about is how many successes you rolled. If the number of successes meets or exceeds the set difficulty, if it's a test, congratulations, you succeeded. If you rolled less successes than the target difficulty number, then the roll was a failure. If you didn't roll any successes at all, that is considered a total failure, which is an especially terrible failure with very dire consequences. There are also criticals in this game. So every pair of 10s is a critical. If you roll 1 10, that's just a regular success. If you roll 2 10s, that's a critical success. Those 2 successes are doubled, becomes 4 successes. Let's show another example here. Say you rolled 3 10s, that means you got 5 successes. The pair equals 4, and then the additional 10 is just a regular success, so 5 total. If you roll 4 10s, you have 2 pairs, so that's 2 criticals. Each of those criticals equals 4 successes. So 4 10s then equals 8 successes total. When you have a critical result, not only is it more successes towards your overall result, but it's also considered a critical win, which is an especially valuable, impactful success. These will often yield additional positive effects or just extra cool dramatic flair to whatever it is you're trying to do. Now, just because you have a critical result doesn't mean you necessarily still have the amount of successes needed to succeed. It's up to a storyteller whether that is an automatic success or not. And certain abilities and powers and things like that will have sort of special things that happen when a critical is rolled. And in some of the specific games, if you roll a critical on the unique dice, those will have additional effects as well. It's not only important to know if you succeeded or failed, it's important to know what the margin of your success was. The margin is just the difference between the number of successes you rolled and the difficulty. So the more you exceeded the amount of successes you needed, the more impactful it is. So let's show some more examples here so you can sort of see this in action. Going back to our scenario, we're trying to trick our guard, we're lying to them, saying we belonged, and we are rolling a manipulation and subterfuge as our storyteller asked us. So, as we noted before, that means we have a dice pool of 7. Let's say the storyteller has set the difficulty at 3. So, in this example, we got 4 successes. The difficulty was 3. That means our roll was successful. The guard believes us, or at least enough to let us go for now, which is all we need to get out of this place and never be seen here again. In this scenario, we only managed to roll 1 success. This is obviously not the 3 we needed, which means it was a failure. The guard does not believe us, he stops us, and he's not going to let us go. We either need to escalate the situation or something bad is going to happen here. In this example, we have a critical roll. We have 3 10s on the dice, but as we know, we need a pair to make it critical. So 2 of those 10s is actually 4 successes, then the other 10 makes 5, and then the 8 makes 6. We got 6 successes with 4 dice on this roll. It was a critical win. Maybe in this case, not only did the guard believe us and let us go, maybe they're embarrassed for bothering us, and they even escort us out so we get out scot-free without being bothered by any more guards. In this result, we have no successes. It is a total failure. In this case, maybe more guards arrive seeing that there's a situation, or maybe this guard gets violent just right off the bat, or any number of bad things could happen that besides just not succeeding, since this was a total failure. Now, there's other options besides just rolling the dice and counting the results. There's special results. One of these is called an automatic success. So if the character just automatically succeeds at what they're trying to do, if their dice pool for that action is twice what the difficulty of that action was. So this is pretty much used just to keep the story flowing. Not everything requires a dice roll. If someone's very good at something, the storyteller should let them be good at it and just automatically succeed at it. It's a cool way to sort of lean into what you're good at and flex those strengths. There's also taking half. This is when, rather than rolling their dice pool, the player can choose to just divide their dice pool in half, round it down, and declare that they have that many successes in their roll. Narratively, these sort of serve the same functions to just let a character that's good at something succeed at doing the thing. An automatic success is more so a storyteller tool. Taking half is slightly different because that's more of a player tool. A player will ask, I'm just going to take half on this. Now, if they don't know the difficulty, maybe they took half thinking it was enough and it ends up it wasn't. That's a risk they're going to have to take. But sometimes that risk might not be as bad as leaving it up to the chance of the dice roll. These methods are typically discouraged or not really allowed in like contested roles, except specifically Werewolf does encourage them for combat. There's also a method called try again. So if you roll and you fail your roll, unless there's something stopping you from just rolling again, you can do so. However, it should have some additional complication or risk, or maybe there's something else that your character needed to do. Maybe they gather more information or got a tool for the job to justify them trying this again. If this is something that there's no risk to trying over and over, and there's really no reason a character can't do it, probably isn't a reason to have that character roll for it in the first place. There's also win at a cost. So when the player rolls to succeed and they don't succeed, but it wasn't a total failure, so they have to have at least some successes, just not enough. Either they or the storyteller can offer a win at a cost. It's sort of a devil's bargain situation. In this case, the storyteller or player can make a suggestion for, okay, you succeed at this, but this bad thing happens. So in these moments of sort of desperation, a player can decide, okay, it's worth it for, I really, really need my character to accomplish this thing, and I'm willing to accept this other consequence for it that's sort of added in to the situation. Ultimately, it's up to the storyteller to approve and make the final decision on what that cost would be, and it's up to a player if they want to accept it or not. They can just take the failure. Ideally, the greater the margin of that they missed the success by, the greater the cost should be as well. There's also willpower re-rolls. So this, we'll get more into willpower later, but essentially, after you've rolled your dice and you've determined how many successes you have, you can spend a point of willpower or take a superficial willpower damage in order to re-roll up to 3 of those dice in your dice. This can only be done once per roll, and in most games, you cannot use a willpower re-roll to re-roll whatever the game's unique dice resource is. Now, technically, teamwork, win at a cost, try again, and even spending willpower are variant rules. I've never really seen a game that doesn't use most of these, especially willpower. I think would be pretty odd to have a game without the willpower reroll mechanic. It's very useful, but just keep that in mind. There are 3 basic types of dice rolls that you'll be doing in the Storyteller system. These are a test, a contest, or a check. A test is like in the examples we gave before. A test is made against a difficulty determined by the storyteller. Player simply needs to roll enough successes to match or beat the number that the difficulty was set at. Let's go back to our warehouse example and show how different dice pools using different traits might be assembled for this scenario. So you're on your way out, you've been caught, and it's really up to the player's imagination what they want to do to get out of it. Say you vaguely recognize the company logo on the guard's uniform, and you might want to try to recall what you know about that company to know if you're dealing with a sort of a low-level value company that's providing security for this warehouse, or if you think this might be a real threat and this is a really serious security company that employs well-trained and well-armed guards. If you want to do that, before continuing on with this scenario, the storyteller might ask for an intelligence finance roll. Say you want to act like you belong. If you've been in the warehouse, you're snooping around, you heard some of the other workers, and you want to try to make some references and act like you belong there to really convince the guard. In this case, the storyteller might ask for a composure etiquette roll. Say you got nothing, but you got these, and you just want to punch the guard in the face. Storyteller's probably going to ask for a strength and brawl roll. All of these examples use a dice pool, but using different traits. And each of these, depending on how plausible they are, will have different difficulties determined by the storyteller. There are certain special abilities and powers unique to the different games that will actually tell you what the dice pool is to use those abilities. A test can also be an ongoing test, meaning, say, you want to spend a lot of time doing something, like investigating something or deciphering an ancient tome. Instead of just doing one roll and either you figured out or you didn't, the storyteller might determine this is an ongoing test. So every night or every week or something like that, as time passes, you can make rolls. The difficulty might be very high, and you just sort of build up to that difficulty, seeing how long it takes you to get it, or if there's a time limit, maybe you don't reach the number of successes needed in time. Okay, we've covered a test. Now we're going to cover the other kind of rolls, a contest. So a contest is when you roll as normal. You have your dice pool, you roll, you count your successes. But instead of aiming for a difficulty number, you're rolling against another character, whether it's another player character or a storyteller character. In these scenarios, whoever has the most successes wins the contest. In a contest, it's still the storyteller that determines which traits are used to assemble a dice pool. And as always, the larger the margin is for the win, the more impactful and dominant that win is. In the case of a tie, whichever character was the aggressor or the one sort of initiating the act or contest is considered the winner with a margin of 1. And contests do not have to be, and often aren't, made up of the same dice pool traits as each other. So let's do an example of a contest. So as before, trying to sneak past the security guard, and specifically you have that item with that you stole. You're trying to sneak this item past the security guard. The guard's suspicious and thinks you might be hiding something. So the storyteller asks you to roll composure plus stealth to keep the item hidden discreetly on your person. The storyteller gives the guard a dice pool using their wits and awareness to notice what you're hiding. So, in this example, you have rolled 2 successes, but luckily the guard rolled even worse. They only rolled 1 success. So in this situation, they did not notice what you are hiding. A conflict roll is essentially the same as a contest, but the results are going to lead to damage, either physical or mental. In combat or social combat, the margin of success is actually how much damage that the winner will be inflicting on their opponent. On a tie and a conflict roll, both participants actually damage each other with a margin of 1. We'll discuss combat more in a minute. There are also checks. So a check is a single dice roll, and it's either a success or a failure. Typically, a check is used with whichever game's unique dice is in play. An example is a vampire will make a rouse check to see if their hunger goes up. A werewolf will make a rage check to see if they lose rage. These checks are usually done when utilizing the resource and activating their abilities. And some more powerful abilities require multiple checks to activate. And for checks, willpower can never be used to re-roll a check, and things like automatic successes or taking half does not apply as well. There are also trackers. You can make a roll using these trackers. And when you do this, instead of using your total rating in this tracker, you're going to actually roll a number of dice determined by what the current rating is. A tracker is something that will fluctuate during the game. Willpower and health are examples of trackers, as are a lot of the unique resources like hunger, rage, desperation. And since no dice pool can fall below 1 dice, even if you have nothing left in that tracker, you still get to roll 1 dice. Do an example of this. We're going to do a willpower roll. These are one of the more common tracker rolls. So this character has 5 willpower, but you've taken 2 superficial willpower damage, whether it's from being hurt in social combat, spending willpower, or something else. This means you have 3 willpower available, and your current dice pool for a willpower roll would be 3 dice, not 5, which is your total. Let's get into trackers more. So trackers are traits on a character sheet that determine different aspects of that character. They have a maximum rating, and then they'll have a current rating that fluctuates during gameplay. All of the games in the Storyteller system will have a health tracker and a willpower tracker. Health represents a character's overall physical well-being and how much damage they can withstand. A character's health is determined by their stamina rating plus 3. So if they have a stamina of 3, that means they have a health tracker with 6 boxes available. If you increase your stamina, that means you increase your health. Willpower measures a character's mental fortitude, their confidence, their stability. This is determined by a character's composure plus resolve rating. So if you have 3 composure, 3 resolve, you have 6 willpower to use. Willpower can be damaged in social combat or by certain abilities, but can also be spent to reroll dice. Spending a point of willpower is the same as taking 1 point of superficial willpower damage. If you increase your stamina or resolve, that means you increase your overall willpower as well. Taking damage. As I said, both the health and willpower trackers can be damaged. Damage typically happens as a result of a conflict roll. If you want to damage someone, that means you need to beat someone in a conflict roll. And you do an amount of damage equal to that margin of the win plus other modifiers for weapons and powers and things like that. Weapons deal additional damage after a successful attack. They don't add dice to the attack roll. They just add damage if you succeeded on the roll. In a social conflict, damage can be added based on more narrative circumstances. If you inflict willpower damage in front of a certain audience or things like that. There are 2 types of damage you can take in this game. That is superficial damage and aggravated damage. Superficial damage is less serious than aggravated damage and can be healed easier. Physical superficial damage involves minor wounds, nothing life-threatening, though taking enough of it can still incapacitate a character. Superficial willpower damage are temporarily damaging, but typically nothing that have lasting effects or alter a character's perception of themselves. Unless otherwise noted, superficial damage is always halved, rounded up before being applied to the tracker. So if you take 5 superficial damage, you would then half that, round it up, so that's 3 that you would actually mark on your tracker, whether that's health or willpower. Aggravated damage are much more serious. And physical aggravated damage are life-threatening, potentially fatal injuries. Cuts, stabs, burns, anything like that count as aggravated damage to a typical human. And for willpower damage, things like dark secrets being revealed or a betrayal by a close personal friend can result in aggravated willpower damage. The cool thing about the various supernatural creatures that you could play is a lot of them only take aggravated damage by very specific sources. For example, vampires take it from daylight, werewolves from silver, but otherwise a lot of the normal cuts, stabbing, things like that are only counted as superficial. Let's look at how we would track damage and show this on a character sheet. So trackers are represented by blank boxes with a maximum that can be filled. Superficial damage is marked with a / in each box as applied. Aggravated damage is marked with an X on the tracker. If a tracker is full of superficial damage, additional damage turns those superficial marks into aggravated damage. And remember, all superficial damage received is halved before being applied to the tracker. So once a tracker is full of damage, they're considered impaired. A character with impaired health receives a 2 dice penalty to all physical dice pools, meaning any that use the physical trait, and a character with impaired willpower receives 2 dice penalty to all social and mental dice pools. If the tracker is full of aggravated damage only, they're considered out of the conflict. When the health tracker is full of aggravated, that character is typically considered incapacitated. If the willpower is fully aggravated damage, they'll break down if in social conflict, but otherwise are basically impaired and in a poor mental state outside of conflict. So back to our example. Our guard cracks you with a baton. They rolled 5 successes and you rolled 1. So the margin of success for them is 4. The baton adds +1 damage. So you take 4 damage due to the margin of their successes, +1 for the baton for a total of 5 damage. Baton's a bashing weapon, and while it hurts like hell, it isn't going to cause life-threatening injuries. I mean, of course, under the right circumstances, realistically, sure, but we generally kind of use movie rules for damage for things like this. So you took 5 superficial damage, but remember we have it rounding up before applying the damage. So the 5 damage is rounded to 3, and we mark 3 superficial damage on our tracker. So you took this damage, but you only have 1 unmarked health box on your tracker. So you apply the 3 damage, but it now fills the health tracker, meaning you're impaired, and converts 2 more of the superficial damage to aggravated damage. Healing. So these rules are going to be for humans, and mostly humans. A lot of supernatural creatures, as I said before, have different rules for healing and taking damage, but these will sort of be the base. So at the beginning of a session, a character can heal their superficial damage if the storyteller's decided enough time has passed since they received their wounds and they've been able to recover appropriately. Willpower damage is healed at the beginning of a session as well, but a character heals a number of willpower equal to their resolve or composure, whichever one is higher. Aggravated damage requires a little bit more. A character can convert aggravated damage to superficial damage by making an intelligence and medicine test. The difficulty equals the total number of aggravated wounds that a character has, and if someone is trying to heal themselves, the difficulty is increased by 1. The maximum amount of aggravated damage that can be converted to superficial damage at a time equals the total number of dots that character has in medicine, halved, rounded up. So if they have 5 in medicine, that means they can convert 3 aggravated damage to superficial damage if they're successful on their test. A character can also just go to the hospital. The World of Darkness takes place in a modern setting, just a little scarier, a little darker. Typically, if they're going to the hospital to heal their aggravated wounds, there's no check or anything necessary, but obviously there's complications there. It requires resources, money to do so, as well as questions can be asked about the nature of their wounds, but mechanically, they will have to stay hospitalized a number of weeks equal to the number of aggravated wounds they have. So if they have 3 aggravated wounds are getting healed, that means they're in the hospital for 3 weeks. Time. Let's talk about how time passes in the Storyteller system. It passes normally. It just passes in whichever way is normal and serves a narrative of your game. But there are certain abilities and encounters, especially kind of require specific units of time to be listed. So we'll go over what those mean in this system. There are scenes. A scene is similar to what you think of a scene in a movie or show. A scene can be as long or as short as needed, whichever kind of serves the story. This could be a single conversation between some characters. A scene can be an entire raid on an enemy compound. Scene typically changes when the characters involved change or just the circumstances or the goals of that scene change. So certain powers and abilities will last for a scene. There are turns. Turn is it represents the amount of time it takes a character to do a fairly simple action. The exact amount of time is just up to the narrative, whatever makes sense. The only time you really need to break a scene into turns is if the timing really matters, if characters are trying to accomplish things in tandem or before the other one, or in combat. A session is it's a game session. It's also called a chapter. This is essentially the beginning to end of when you gather with people and play the game. Again, this matters because some powers and things will say they last for a session, or some things can only be used once per session. A story is sort of a full narrative arc. Think of it as like a season in a show. It might not be rigid and exact what a story length of time is, but again, there's certain things that can only be used once per story, and you'll kind of work with your storyteller to determine what those parameters are. And then there's a chronicle, or this is what in other games would be called the campaign. This is the entire complete overarching stories that make up a complete chronicle. By the end of a chronicle, that usually is going to end in some sort of meaningful climax and result in the conclusion of the player character arcs. And then there are actions. So the Storyteller system has 3 different types of actions: a full action, a minor action, and a free action. Really, you're pretty much just going to be using actions in this. Action economy really only matters in combat specifically. Unless otherwise noted, an action is just going to take your character's turn. Things that are minor actions will typically say so and will typically be tied to different gifts and abilities and things like that. More than likely, any action you say you want your character to take is just going to be a regular action, a full action. Things that are minor actions are usually noted as being minor actions. You can always work out with your storyteller if there's other things you want to do that you think will count as minor actions. Typically, these are noted in whatever power or ability you're using as well. Minor actions are done alongside an action, but they impose a 2 dice penalty on whatever that action's dice roll is. And then free actions are just things that can be done with no effect to the dice pool or anything of that nature. Certain abilities and powers will say that these are free actions, so you know that they don't interrupt the flow of anything else. Finally, we will get into combat, or what this game calls conflict, because this can be physical combat or social combat. I'll cover these in depth in another video. There's a lot of advanced rules and different crunch you can do, but this will sort of cover the basics of specifically physical combat. Initiative and turn order. These things are not actually determined by dice rolls as they are in a lot of other games. When combat starts, the players simply let the storyteller know, or the storyteller will ask them one at a time, what their intentions are and how they're trying to do that thing. And the storyteller determines based on that the order in which these things are done. There is a chart that the book uses that we'll look at that shows a typical turn order as it makes sense narratively. So it'll go as follows in descending order. We'll start with close combat between already engaged parties, ranged combat, newly initiated physical combat, then everything else. If there's ties or concern it doesn't make sense for multiple actions to be happening at the same time, this could be decided with dexterity and wits Not a roll, but just seeing who has the higher total of the two, or whatever skill's being used. Turns. So in combat, a character's action is done on their turn. A turn is just represents whatever the character's intentions are, and not necessarily single movements. So during a turn, if two characters are attacking each other, or if there's an attacker and defender, if they're engaged in combat, both of those opponents will roll at the same time. Whoever scores the most successes wins. The winner will see how many they won by, their margin of victory, and whatever that number is, that's how much damage will then be applied to their opponent. If they beat their opponent by 3 successes, they're doing 3 damage. As I said before, in a tie, both characters actually damage each other with a margin of 1. If one character is attacking and the other character is defending, and the defender wins, they don't inflict damage on the attacker. Instead, they just don't take any damage. They successfully defend it. This also means usually the best offense is a good offense, because if you just out-offense your opponent, not only did they not hurt you, but you hurt them. But sometimes, depending on your skills, that's not always the best option. Defending and dodging from physical attacks is typically going to be a dexterity plus athletics roll. There's also the 3 turns and out method. This is a recommendation for World of Darkness games, and it sort of is a way to resolve conflict in a quicker manner, specifically in 3 turns. This helps avoid sort of the slog of combat that happens in a lot of TTRPGs and just the story getting really slowed down by just dice rolling. And it's a little bit better to maintain dramatic pacing this way as well. World of Darkness and the Storyteller System are not designed in a lot of the sort of war game combat encounter simulation that other TTRPGs are. They're definitely narrative focused. So the combat system is meant to sort of be smooth and streamlined and quick. So what this method means is after 3 turns of combat, they suggest that you figure out who won the combat then. A lot of times you could just see who was winning by whoever did the most damage, or what the numbers, or any number of factors. After 3 turns, the storyteller could kind of get a feel for, okay, this side definitely seems to be they'll eventually win. So instead of making them roll this out multiple more turns to slowly whittle them away, we're going to sort of introduce a narrative moment, or let things work narratively between the storyteller. The players can participate as well and sort of describe how the one side defeats the other. This means one side might surrender because they see they're losing, or some other story thing could happen to sort of interrupt the combat as well. The intention is just for combat to be figured out after 3 turns of it. Of course, if your group likes combat and doing this, you certainly do not have to do this. It's just a suggestion in case it feels like it's ruining the pace of the game or anything like that. In closing, that covers the basic core mechanics of the Storyteller System, which means now you know how to play multiple other games, mostly. Each of those unique games, I will have videos on the rules specific to them that you could check out to get a more full idea of how to play those. But this is a very good baseline and makes up a majority of what you'll need to know to play the games. Hopefully this serves as an easy reference or a great starting point for those of you learning the system for the first time. Should be able to click on the different timestamps to sort of reference specific rules and mechanics as well. I think this is a better option than having to flip back and forth in a book, because the way a lot of these rules are presented are non-linear, and you're going to be jumping around a lot and figuring out where to find certain things. So hopefully I presented these in a way that made sense and is all in one place. Though I suggest using reference sheets, and online there's different equivalent of like storyteller screens and things like that to help reference now that you have an idea of how the rules work. I did the flipping for you, so yeah, you're welcome. But also, I love this stuff and I love this system, and hopefully I presented it in a way that it's easy to grasp for you as well. This chapter is closed. Our ritual must end. Thank you for letting me in, and don't forget to close the door.